This is Grandma Lorie with the Bible story of Joshua and the Battle of Jericho. In our last story, we saw that all the cities on the east side of the River Jordan, wait, that's east, isn't it? Were conquered. 3 tribes took over the land and moved into the cities, but they agreed that their men would still fight with the rest of Israel to conquer the land. Now, I'm going to try this and hope it works. Bing. Share. I hope you can all see that. This is what the land of Israel looked like. They had already conquered this group of people and this group of people, and up here, the group of people in Moab that we talked about. And so now they set up a great big camp in a place called Shittim. And from there, I'm going to explain this map, but then I'm going to take it away. They went across from Shittim. Oh, got to show you this. Do you see this dark area? This is the regular River Jordan. And by the time it gets down here, it's really skinny and it goes down and empties in the Red Sea. See, it's about as big as a tapeworm right there. But in the spring, it floods. It can be as wide as 100 feet and as deep as 10 feet deep, as seen here. This is the way the River Jordan would have looked when Israel was going to cross the River Jordan. That's another miracle. Now, after they got across the River Jordan, they set up camp in a place called Gilgal. Now, you see Jericho right over here. Jericho is important because Jericho, they've got to destroy. You see this mountain range right here? All of the other areas where Israel wants to live is in and around those mountain ranges, and they can't get up into the mountain range until they get through Jericho. So the whole point here is to get rid of Jericho. And why does this say Adam? I'll tell you. When they stopped the river to cross, all of the waters backed up in piles all the way to a little town called Adam. That's why it's there. So they had to walk 2 miles across the Jordan and 100 feet deep. Okay. At this point in Israel's story, Moses' long service as the greatest prophet was finished. Most Bibles say that Moses went up into a high mountain to die. But we know from modern revelation that Moses did not die up in that mountain. Instead, God changed his body in an instant into what is called a translated body so that it would not die. His body would stay alive, younger and stronger, until the time for it to be fully resurrected. Translated is kind of halfway between being immortal like us and being resurrected like Jesus. That is the same change made to all of the people in the city of Enoch that was raised up into heaven. Remember that story? It also happened in a later story to the prophet Elijah, who was taken up into heaven in a fiery chariot. So here were the children of Israel still camped on the east bank of the River Jordan. What would they do without Moses to lead them? I'll tell you. God spoke to Joshua and said, "Now that Moses, my servant, is gone, you, Joshua, are to take his place and govern this people. Do not delay, but lead them across the Jordan River now, and conquer the land which I have given to them." God also told Joshua, "Be strong and of good courage. I will be with you as I was with Moses. Read constantly the book of the law which Moses gave you, and be careful to obey all that is written in this. Do this, and Israel will have great success." Joshua told the people what the Lord had said. The people were glad to accept Joshua as their new prophet leader because he had always been faithful and smart and strong. And maybe he was a little more fun than Moses. Right away, I didn't say that. Right away, Joshua told his head officers, "Go through the camp and tell the people to prepare food for a journey. For in 3 days we shall pass over the river Jordan and shall go into the land which the Lord has promised us." This was an amazing thing to say. You see, at that time of year, in the spring, the Jordan was wider and deeper than any other time of the year. All its banks had overflowed, and it was running as wide and a deep, fast river down to the Dead Sea. I'm going to show you that picture again. You see how big it had become, how wide. In fact, it was wide all the way down to the Dead Sea, but we're not going to worry about that right this minute. And this is where the people of Israel were, and this is where Joshua was going to take them, right to there. One Bible expert says the Jordan in flood was about 2 miles wide and 100 feet deep. That's as deep as a 10-story building with wild, swift flow. Got to show you the wild, swift flow. This is an actual picture of the Jordan in flood. Looks fun. Would you like to swim across that? Would you like to boat across that?
Probably not.
Besides, the Israelites didn't have any boats. Okay. So no one could possibly walk across this flood. Although nowadays, if you go visit the Jordan, you can walk across almost anywhere because nowadays they have irrigation and they've taken all of the, most of the water out of the Jordan. And besides, Joshua's not crossing these days. Okay. So on the other side of the river, a few miles away, the Israelites could see the high walls of the city of Jericho. You remember where I just told you to look at Jericho? It was standing at the foot of the mountains. Before the rest of the land could be won, Jericho must be conquered, for it stood beside the road leading up to the rest of the mountains. Joshua chose 2 careful, brave, very strong and wise men. He told them, "Go across the river and sneak into the city of Jericho. Find out all you can about it and come back in 2 days to give me word." The 2 strong men managed to swim across the river. They walked over to Jericho and snuck into the city at night. But somebody saw them and told the king of Jericho. Keep in mind that the people of Jericho, from the king to the lowest slave, were wicked, murderous, idol worshippers who committed many sins. The Lord would not have gotten rid of them if they had been righteous. But everyone in Jericho had heard the whole story of the Israelite miracles in Egypt and crossing the Red Sea, and they were afraid of God's people. They knew the God of Israel had promised to wipe them out. So the king sent officers into the city to find those spies and take them prisoners. At that exact moment, Joshua's spies came to a house that was built right into the wall of the cities. The spies knew, these are the Israeli spies, by the Spirit of the Lord, that they must go into that particular house. They knocked. Inside was a woman named Rahab. Remember Rahab? She had been captured as a girl and forced to pleasure men, if you know what I mean. She was also a weaver of cloth. Rahab felt the Spirit of the Lord when she saw those 2 spies in her doorway and knew that God was absolutely going to help the people of Israel and not the people of Jericho. Rahab recognized the spies and said, "Come in quickly. The soldiers are looking everywhere. Rahab had a lot of flax leaves drying on the roof. Flax is a plant with long stems and long leaves that can be dried, processed, and then woven into linen cloth. We still have linen cloth today. It's very cool in a hot place, and generally that area of the country is very hot. Rahab welcomed the men and took them up on her roof. She said, "Lie down quickly. I'm going to cover you up with my flax plants." She piled the drying flax over the top of them to hide them. The officers out in the streets were searching all the buildings and houses around the place where the Israeli spies had been seen. They came to Rahab's house and banged on her door. "Let us in. We need to search your house." They looked through every room and every hiding place, in the storerooms, in her weaving rooms, behind her looms. They even went up on her roof. But all they saw up there was heaps of drying flax. Since the officers could not find the spies, they left Rahab's house and went on searching other nearby places. Perhaps, they thought, the spies had gotten out of the city. When it was safe, Rahab went up and uncovered the spies and said to them, "All of us in this city know that your God is mighty and terrible, and that he has given you this whole land. We have heard how your God dried up the Red Sea so you could walk over. He led you through the desert and gave you victory over all of your enemies. We even saw the Jordan part," because they had high walls and they could watch from the top of the walls. "And now the people in the city fear you terribly, for they know your God will give this city and this land to you." The spies asked, "But how can we get out of the city if the soldiers are in all the streets looking for us?" Rahab said, "I know a way, and I will help you if you will make me a promise. Swear in the name of your God that you will spare my life and the lives of my father and mother and all my brothers and sisters when you come to take over the city." The men told her, "We will pledge our lives for yours that no harm shall come to you or anyone in your house, for you have saved our lives and helped our people." As I said, Rahab's house was built right into the city wall. Through one of her windows, Rahab let down a rope. This rope was made of bright scarlet linen, made from some of the red linen Rahab wove her cloth out of. One of the spies said to Rahab, "When our men come to take this city, you must have this scarlet rope hanging out of your window. Bring your father, your mother, and your family into your house and keep them there while we are battling the city. If they leave this house, all bets are off. We will tell our men not to harm the people who are in the house where the scarlet cord hangs from the window. So all your family will be safe when the city is taken." That night, the two men slid down the rope and found their way to the river in the dark. They swam over again and told their story to Joshua. They said, "Truly, the Lord has given to us all the land, for the people in Jericho are in terror before us and will not dare fight back." You need to know that each city in the whole land of Canaan was held and ruled over by one king each. None of the cities would join with the other cities to fight the Israelites. Each city was a small nation living in the land, each one a little tribe. So it would be much easier for the huge united tribes of Israel to destroy them one by one, because the cities did not band themselves together into one army to fight back. And Israel was now a strong, united people, trained for war and willing to obey one leader, Joshua. So all of the 12 tribes were ready to fight as if they were one man. Joshua commanded the people, "Take down your tents and move from this camping place toward the banks of the swollen river." The priests took apart the tabernacle, covered the ark with a cloth, and ran poles through the rings of the huge altar so they could lift it and carry it. The people rolled up their tents, brought together their flocks and cattle. When Joshua gave the word, everybody marched down toward the river, which was rolling high and strong in front of them. Joshua said, "Let the priests carry the Ark of the Covenant first before everyone else to the bank of the river. The rest of you stay 3,000 feet back." When the ark and the priests got to the shore, Joshua told the priests, "Now walk right into the water of the river." Having faith, the priests walked forward. Then a most wonderful thing happened. As soon as the feet of the priests touched the water at the shore, the river above stopped flowing, and far, far away up the river, they could see the water piling up in a great heap. What a miracle! And below the place where they were standing, the water ran on down and away until it left a great dry road, and the stones on the bottom of the river were uncovered. The amazing thing was that the riverbed was dry, not even mud. Now, that's a double miracle. Can you imagine the bottom of a river that's been there forever not having mud? At Joshua's command, the priests carried the ark down to the middle of the dry riverbed and stood there with it on their shoulders. There we go. Can you see here are the priests holding up the ark that's covered with cloth, and here are the hosts of Israel walking past to the other side. And whoever saw water heaped up, not me, it must have been a miracle. Then Joshua gave the order for the people to march across the river. The other tribes, each by itself, marched across until they had all passed over the river. And all this time, the priests stood on the dry riverbed holding the ark. Then Joshua called for 12 men, one strong man from every tribe, and said to them, "Go down into the river and bring up from it 12 stones, the largest stones you can carry. Take them from the place where the priests are standing to the other side of the river." Let's see if I can get this back. So see all these stones down here? They took the stones out and they took them to the other side of the river. They did what he said, and with these stones, Joshua made a stone heap on the far side of the river. Then he said, "Let this heap of stones stand here to keep in memory of what has taken place today. When your children shall ask you, 'Why are these stones here?' you shall say to them, 'Because here the Lord God made the river dry before the Ark of the Covenant, so that the people could cross over the land that God had promised to their fathers.'" Then Joshua told these 12 men to take another 12 stones and make a heap in the river bed where the priest stood with the ark, so that these stones also might stand to remind everyone who should see them of God's wonderful help to his people. After the 2 heaps of stone had been piled up, one on the bank by Jericho, the other on the bed of the river, Joshua told the priests, "Come up from the river now and bring the ark to the shore." The priests did so. Immediately, the piled up waters began to flow from upstream until the river Jordan was rolling by, just as it had before. Now, at last, the children of Israel were safely in the land of promise that their fathers had been promised more than 500 years ago. They set up a new camp with the tabernacle in the center, and they called the place Gilgal, which I hope you can remember from the map. It was now the season for the spring harvest, and the fields were full of grain and barley in abundance. The Israelites gathered it, ground it up, and made real bread out of it. And on that day, the manna, which God had sent them through 40 years, stopped appearing forever. It was not needed anymore. But forever after, Israelites would have to work hard, like other people, to grow their own food. Not far off, in front of the new camp, stood the strong walls of Jericho. Joshua walked out by himself to take a good look at the city and saw a man coming toward him with a great big drawn sword. But Joshua was bold. He walked up to the man and asked, "Are you on our side or are you one of our enemies?" The man replied, "I have come as captain of the Lord's host." Then Joshua saw that the man was an angel of the Lord and bowed to the ground before him. He asked, "What word has my Lord to his servant?" The powerful angel said, "Take off your shoes from off your feet, for you stand on holy ground." Joshua did just that, for he realized the man who was speaking to him was not merely an angel, but Jesus Christ's own premortal spirit. The Lord said to Joshua, "I have given you Jericho and its king and its mighty men of war. I will destroy the city of Jericho before your eyes." Then the Lord told Joshua the way in which the city should fall. And Joshua went back to the camp at Gilgal and made ready to march in the way that God commanded. During the next 7 days, all that was done just exactly as the Lord told Joshua. Israel finally marched out the army in a long column as if to fight against the city. At the front of the column came all the soldiers. I looked on the internet and it said probably 600,000 soldiers. Next came 7 priests with trumpets made of ram's horns, which they blew long and loud. Then came the Ark of the Covenant, borne on the shoulders of the priests. And last of all came the whole rest of the hosts of Israel, marching in order of tribes. We're talking about as many as 1 million people. But no one shouted, cheered, threatened, or made any noise at all, except the tromping of 1 million feet and the sounds of ram's horns, trumpets. They marched around the walls of Jericho one time that day, causing the ground to tremble, and then they all went back to their camp. The people watching from Jericho's walls must have thought that was mighty spooky. All those 1 million totally silent people and all that quivering stomping. The next morning, Israel formed up in the same order and again marched once around the walls of the city. They repeated this once for each of 6 days. On the 7th day, by God's command, they rose very early in the morning and did not stop when they had marched around the walls once, but kept on marching round and round, the ground trembling beneath their feet until they had circled the city 7 times. As everyone in Israel walked by, they saw at one window on the wall a scarlet cord hanging down. And they knew that was the house of Rahab, who had saved the lives of their two spies and told them how frightened the people of Jericho were. When the seventh march was ended, they all stood still, perfectly silent. Even the trumpets stopped, and there was a huge silence for a moment until the voice of Joshua rang out, "Shout, for the Lord has given you the city." Then an enormous, gigantic shout went up from all the people at once. They saw the walls trembling and shaking as if there were an earthquake. And the Lord might have added an earthquake to the shouting. Then crumbling, the walls fell down in heaps of bricks in every place except one. There was one part of the building left standing. Bing, 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 bing. And there it is. One part of the wall had a red rope hanging out of the window. Everywhere else was collapsed into piles of bricks. Joshua said to the two spies, "Go quickly and bring out Rahab and her family and take them to a safe place." The men went to Rahab's house on the wall and brought her out. And with her were her father and mother and all of their family. The spies took care of them and kept them safely in the camp of the Israelites until all the war against the people of the land was ended and over. While just a few men were taking care of Rahab's family, all the rest of the army was climbing up over the ruined walls. The people in the city were so filled with fear when they saw the walls falling down on every side that they did not even try to fight back, but fell down helpless on the ground and were slain by the Israelites. Thus, the city was taken and everything that was within it. But the Israelites were forbidden by the Lord through Joshua to take any of the treasure of the city for themselves. Joshua said, "Nothing in this city belongs to you. It is the Lord's." So they piled up all the gold and silver and things of brass and iron to save for the tabernacle. All of that metal was passed through fire at the Lord's command. Nothing was just kept the way it was. All of the rest of what they found in the city, everything was burned up. Wood, cloth, grain, straw, food, houses, animal and human bodies and buildings. Everything was burned and destroyed, leaving the city of Jericho but nothing but a waste and desolation. Now, this is Grandma Lorie just wondering something. If the Lord required everything to be burned up and even the metal to be fired or melted, I wonder if there were diseases in that city that God didn't want to spread to the children of Israel. Certainly nobody in those days knew about sterilizing germs with fire. But if there were any diseases in Jericho, all of that burning would have destroyed them completely. Who knows? Anyway, after the battle, Joshua cursed the ruins of the city, saying, "Let the Lord's curse rest on any man who shall ever again build the city of Jericho. He shall lose his firstborn son and his lastborn son." And that actually did happen a long time later. But what about Rahab, the woman who had saved the spies, helped the Israelites, and hung the scarlet rope out of her window? She was adopted by the people of Israel just as though she'd been born among them. One of the nobles of the tribe of Judah, whose name was Salmon, took her for his wife. And from the line of Rahab's descendants, Many years after this was born David the king, David of Goliath fame. And many, many more years after David, another descendant was born in a manger in Bethlehem. Jesus, the eternal King of the universe. That's today's story, and Grandma Lorie hopes you liked it and will remember it.